crop circles, and do you have like certain messages you think that they're trying to send through these?
Great question about crop circles. And by the way, just hold Colin Andrews in your thoughts and prayers. I got an email late last night that he is in critical condition, is at Yale University Hospital with a type of heart condition, and he is in really critical condition. He's the premier crop circle researcher. He's a really good friend since 92, 91. So, you know, I was shocked to hear this last night. But I would say that, you know, the majority of crop circles at this point are hoaxed. However, the ones that have been authentic are really amazing. The problem is sifting out the noise from the sound. It's just like UFOs. You know, what part of it's man-made and disinformation and hoaxed, and what part of it is real. But my own sense of it is that it's certainly a way that they're trying to visually convey almost archetype knowledge of symbols and shapes and, if you will, sacred geometry through a very visual medium, transdimensionally. And the way I think they're created, because we interviewed, Colin Andrews and I interviewed a farmer, believe it or not, his name was Mr. Bull. It's like, you can't make that up either, near Alton Barnes. And he had been out on his farm in daytime, and there had been a crop circle that had formed, and then he was there when this energy field just came out of the sky, and it was like a dark, it was like a mobile black hole. And it came down, and all of a sudden, everything started swirling and moving and bending down around it. And what I figured out by studying the real crop circles, and you know, the 𝗖𝗘 logo is a crop circle that we communicated visually to the ETs that they put into a field in 1992. And that whole story is a fascinating story. But what I figured out is that what they're doing is that they're augmenting or increasing the gravitational field over a certain area, over with a template, if you will, like a cutout, like a blueprint, electromagnetic blueprint, that then goes and lays this down very quickly. Now the ones that are hoaxed are just smushed down, but these are very fascinating. And so if you can imagine creating a counter-rotating electromagnetic field that causes levitation, which is what anti-gravity is, in a certain resonant frequency, using crystalline materials and nanocrystalline materials. I mean, we know exactly how this works. But then reverse that. You're increasing the gravitational field, so you can have an object way out in space, and it kind of targets an area very specifically and can create this energy field that then pulls the crop down instead of lifting it up, but in a very specific pattern. It goes very quickly. And that's how we figured out how they're making it, how they're making the authentic crop circles. Yes?
Are we finished? Have you heard of the 𝗘𝗏 Foundation and any of his work?
Yes, I've heard of them. We've corresponded, and we've asked for, you know, evidence of proof of principle operation and never gotten anything. So we're still waiting to see if they have anything. It's easy to make a claim. Our requirement, as you know, for these energy technologies is transparent conveyance of them to us with transparent testing, but more importantly, third-party creation of the effect, which is the sine qua non of science. If it's not reproducible, it's not science. It has to be reproducible. And so that's what we've asked for, but we haven't gotten anything in response yet. So, yes, sir.
You spoke about how difficult it would be for a craft to come down without getting shut down, that there are so many things in place that as soon as they would show up, somebody's there right away.
Is there a question? Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, he's asking about you know, this whole issue of when you're, you know, setting up a CE5 or wanting to invite ETs to come into an area, you know, what kind of things might interfere. And the problem is that in the last 60 years, we've gone from, or 70 years since Roswell, we've gone from fairly primitive electromagnetic targeting, to very sophisticated ones that are based, space-based, and on aircraft. And these have been used. Now, we were at Mount Shasta a few years ago when we were doing 𝗖𝗍, and there was this really not fully materialized craft. It was like a sphere of pure white energy, light, visible. Everyone saw, 30 people, 40 people. And it was floating towards us out of Mount Shasta, about 12,000 feet elevation. And we were at about 7,000, so probably about 5,000 AGL, above ground level. And it was coming towards us. And there was a very high altitude, it seemed like it was a 747, especially equipped, and a burst of energy came out of this aircraft. And at that instant, this partially in this dimension craft vanished, and this energy field, it was invisible, but came in about 200 yards in front of us into the woods and crashed through the woods, ripping the tree limbs off in the trees, and actually impacted the earth and went boom, and then boom, boom, boom. It for 15 seconds shook the earth. And I thought we were expecting to see a mushroom cloud. Nothing. It was just a directed energy weapon. And that was one of the few times where I was really scared for my group. And I thought, my God, we're all going to get killed. And everyone there saw this. And that's when, you know, a few things like that happen. And that's why one of our protocols is always let the ETs know, don't do anything too risky, because we don't want you or us to get caught in the crossfire. This is why we initially started these briefings with the military to ask that we have them deconflict their operations with ours, but they didn't listen because the operations that want to interfere. Now, why would that happen? They don't want 𝗖𝗍 events to go so far that it results in a massive, open, dispositive event that can't be ambiguous. And that's why it tends to be quick, strange. Now, can that change? Yes, perhaps. But people have asked me, why don't you go to the Amazon? Or I don't think it matters. Because the weapon systems I've been briefed on are geospatial. They can be moved, and there can be on what look like satellites or aircraft that can be anywhere in the world. So I think that that's why, as the head of this, I mean, there are thousands of people doing the 𝗖𝗍 initiative. I always tell people the biggest liability is if I'm there. So do it without me. Because they don't have enough assets to keep track of thousands of teams, but they can keep track of where I am. So, but when this happened, it made me realize that they had some new things that were quite amazing. But luckily, this particular ET object wasn't fully in this dimension. It was almost like a plasma energy that was floating towards us from way up in Mount Shasta, came out of the mountain. And we have actually some great videotapes of those objects coming out of the mountain, but this one was actually coming towards us when this object fired. And so that's why I always ask the ETs, you know, come, but don't do anything that is too risky for you or us. Do it only if it's safe and appropriate for this time and place. And, you know, I don't think that this is a huge problem for local contact teams that have 4 or 5 people scattered around, because, I mean, this group is large, but it's not omniscient and omnipresent. But when I'm doing something and it's obviously been announced and we're there with a whole group of trainees, it's certainly going to be monitored. So that's why I tell people that it's great as a training event. We have amazing sightings and events happen. But, I mean, the good news is I'm there. The bad news is I'm there. I mean, being quite honest with you. Yes, sir.
How would you, the contacts that you have, the communications that you have, how would you characterize them? Do they break down into, do you communicate about the same things or the same general things each time, or is it just all over the place?
He's asking, you know, how the communications kind of break down into different types of communications and information. It actually is different with every group. And every time we go out, there's something new that happens I've never seen. And I've been doing this for 25 years. So if you read the book, Extraterrestrial Countdown Transformation, what you'll see in that book is that there are literally thousands of different phenomenon that happen and have happened over the years. And it runs the gamut to fully materialized objects that appear right over us, and people getting remote viewed information consciously, to we were sitting one time out in Orange County and sitting right in front of all of us. I was doing just a weekend thing. There was a voice that started talking right in front of us in thin air.
Is there a consistent message, though?
It depends on the group. And the message, obviously, is that they're very happy we're doing this, and it's always a welcoming sort of a feeling. But sometimes there is very specific information, and it just depends on the setting. When this 𝗖𝗘𝗍𝗍, who appeared at Joshua Tree, the one that looks like this luminous figure floating outside the circle, it was a very specific welcome from a group of people. Now, the way that was preceded was that we were in our circle up in the Joshua Tree National Park, and we were at a break, and I'd walked out east of the circle out into the desert, and I was with a group of people on my team, and suddenly there was like a sphere that fully materialized right beside me and walked with me. And I said, oh, they're here. So we went back to the group to get people back together, because they were all scattered. There's 30, 40 people in the desert. And it's pitch black. And all of a sudden, we hear a group of 4 or 5 ETs talking. And they're outside the circle to the southeast. And we could hear mostly, it sounded like female voices except for one. I heard a male voice. And by the way, almost everyone heard this. And I have these really good night vision binoculars, like generation advanced. And there was nothing there where you heard these people talking. So I turned to everyone, I said, we need to get back together in coherence and sit down. And I asked someone to take a picture. So Raven, a member of my team, was just holding her breath, but she didn't have a tripod, and took a picture, 3 or 4 second exposure, and in it is this being floating right outside our circle, turned and waving. It's not Photoshopped. That is the single most important picture in the history of the UFO subject, because it was a CE5 diplomatic initiative that ended up having photographic proof of it, our contact team. So it's been roundly missed by most people. It is the single most important piece of evidence in the last 100 years that I know of. So anyway, it was beautiful. And then we went into this meditative state, and there were all kinds of information that we started getting. All our electronic, we have these magnetometers, magnetic field meters, and radar detectors and other high-tech stuff, all started talking. And it went on for about 2 hours. It was amazing. And so figuring out what they're actually communicating is an art of, someone would say, is it telepathic? I said, no, it's sensing. So you go into a deep state, and you can actually get specific information about where they're from, why they're there. But it's very different each time. You know, we're going to be up in Joshua Tree in a couple weeks, and then in the Rocky Mountains in June. And we may do something in Portugal, you know, this fall, and some other things this summer. I don't know. But I'd like to go to Portugal and do it. We'll see. We're looking for a good place to do it. But yeah, it's a beautiful experience. And what I tell people is that, you know, it's almost universally where they're wanting to do sort of a cultural exchange. They're wanting to see how you are. And then a lot of times they will show you visually their planet or their houses or their culture. It's really quite beautiful. And people who have never had experiences like that will have these breakthrough events, and it just blows their minds. The other thing is that sound can also be seen at a certain resonant frequency. So one time we were up at Mount Shasta, a different time, and we were sitting in the National Forest, and there was a tone that came out of, it was a multi-directional tone that just emerged out of the air. And everyone, we were in our meditative state, and everyone saw what looked like a gunmetal gray or pearlish gray sphere that moved through the circle like a string of pearls. So the sound created the form, which is very Vedic if you understand the Vedas, name and form, sound and form. And that was definitely ET. And it was astonishing because almost everyone sitting there heard and saw in their visual image the same object move through. beautiful.